we're going to announce the top 25. So, drum roll, please. Oh, we need coffee in aisle 2 here. So, the top 5 for the university stage, starting with, in no particular order, Pump ML, Cardi Acoustics, Ticket Rev, Backyard Gig, and Sabella. Let's hear it for the university top 5 finishers. Congratulations. And now we'll move on to announce the top 10 early stage companies. Starting with Genio.ly, iAccess, Bond 2, Talent 2, that rhymes, Cressy, Carbon Limit, I Help Moms, Wise Cut, congrats, Unmute, and Sarah. So congratulations to the top 10 early stage finalists. And to close out the announcements, we have our top 10 late stage finalists, starting with Storybook App, Movia Robotics, Derma Sensor, Neural Mind, GenoBank, Togao AI, congrats, Cast AI, Vouch, Link, and Paddle. Those are your top 10 late stage. Let's hear it for all 25, please, finalists. Yesterday, really, if you joined us for some of the workshops and presentations here, a lot of the conversation was based on education and equity and access, which is a very refreshing are very refreshing topics to hear at a tech event, right? So I would like to invite my good friend Kumar Thompson to join me on stage to reflect a little bit on those topics.
Is this on? Okay, great. I just want to echo Carlos and say good morning to everyone. I want us to go through a little bit of an exercise. This morning when you woke up, you probably maybe grabbed coffee, got dressed, and then if you're anything like me, you might have rushed down here, got caught in traffic, might have been frustrated, and then you walked in. This is not your office, necessarily, but already you have a lot of feelings of angst, frustration, etc. What could your organization do? If you were a student, what could your school do to ensure that they thought about you as a human being first and as productivity second? So what I would love for us to think about and talk about and do right now, if you guys are willing. You guys willing to do this with me? We're going to do a little stretch. We're going to take some time before you get into the day, to the real day. We're going to stretch out. So if everyone stands up with me. Don't be shy. Just go ahead and stand. We've been doing a lot of sitting during the pandemic, right? We've been doing a lot of Zoom meetings. You might have a little back pain in the back. So we're going to do a stretch around your back. We're going to be calling it the cactus twist. So we're going to put our hands out like this. Then we're going to twist as far as possible to the left. Hold that. And then slowly to the right. Hold that. And then come back to the middle. You guys can sit down. This was just a break. But this is what I talk to educators, school leaders, organizational leaders about. How can we do stretch breaks before we get into the productivity of work, before we get into the productivity of a tool? How do we center the minds of our students? So the pandemic happened, and and you guys can call this out, what were some of the needs that human beings had when the pandemic happened? Just period, what you heard on the news. Food, what else? Toilet paper. What else? Okay, I don't know mass happened right away, but eventually mass happened. Okay, what else? The internet. Did people all keep their jobs? So we had some insecurity there. Did people all keep their housing necessarily? So we had some insecurity there. But yet we wanted kids to show up because we all are into education, technology. Technology is amazing. Let them show up and be ready to learn. But we haven't met any of their needs. We didn't think about them as human beings. We didn't say to ourselves, hey, how are these kids going to eat? How many of you guys learned for the first time during the pandemic that many students get most of their meals from their school lunches and from the school breakfast, or maybe even from their after-school program? If you learned that for the first time during the pandemic, raise your hand. If you knew that already, raise your hand. So we needed to know that schools had to step in first and foremost around food security. Then, did anyone think about the fact that maybe some of our students were in housing situations that were not safe? And then they were stuck at home in unsafe environments. But we were worried about whether or not they were going to go onto the Zoom call and learn something. But we're not worried about whether or not they were safe at home. If you're not safe, if you're not fed, if you're hungry, how in the world are you supposed to retain information? How in the world are you supposed to think critically? So when I say, and we're talking just from a student perspective, do you guys work in education? Anybody here work in education? Anybody here work in education? Okay, for your staff, did you guys know what problems your staff were having in the household during the pandemic? Did you know whether or not they were in abusive relationships? Did you know whether or not they couldn't go to their second or third job and so they were worried about money? Did you know those things? Did you know whether or not they had children at home that they had to, quote unquote, homeschool while also teaching a class of children all day long? How many of you guys thought about that? How many of you guys talked about that? How many of you guys had conversations, open, honest, and vulnerable conversations, so not just that your students were safe, but that your educators felt safe as well? That's human design thinking. If the first thing you thought about in the pandemic was how I'm going to get everybody online and what's the latest technology, you were not thinking human-centered. What you should have been thinking is, are everybody's needs being met? Are they safe? And what can we collectively do to ensure that people can bring their best selves to the table so that they can be the best selves for themselves, first and foremost? Carlos?
Yeah, no, and this is a glimpse of what we'll be talking throughout the day. If you look on your program, you see the window into the workforce. Not only schools, but companies have had to reevaluate and recalibrate how they treat employees. And that's the power of EdTech, which is also why EdTech, last year, the biggest investment year in the history of EdTech. So there's a lot of needs to address on the holistic side of people. And so join us throughout the day for some of those lightning topics, including my good friends over at the CTE of Miami-Dade County Public Schools who are here, and some teachers will also be sharing some reflections on what they've gone through and what the future looks like for our workforce.